But Mitt Romney today, you just saw in Colorado, which is one of the important battleground states, making the point that President Obama has an outsourcing problem.
Yeah, he does. And the outsourcing issue really causes two problems for President Obama. One, it underscores his dishonesty. The ad they were running, which all the independent fact-checking groups have said is dishonest, ends with President Obama saying, "I'm President Obama and I approve this message." It should say, "I'm President Obama, I approve this dishonest message." And the second problem he has with outsourcing is that there is a huge amount of outsourcing which was driven by Obama policy. The money, the $500 million they gave to Fisker created jobs in Finland. The solar energy grants they gave and created jobs in Mexico. The wind turbine grants they gave created jobs in Denmark. So the point that I think is really interesting is that the outsourcing issue underscores how few smarts there are in this White House and in this Obama campaign, that they expose themselves to the response criticism that I think, unlike what Mr. Solicitor said, is going to end up making this a winning issue for Mitt Romney.
But isn't it a winning issue for the White House fundamentally? Granted that the PolitiFact folks and the Washington Post pointed out that the president's campaign ad on that issue had a lot of questions and a lot of questionable attack lines.
No, they said it was wrong. A lot of questions is not right. It was wrong.
Okay. But the point is that isn't Mitt Romney more vulnerable than the president on this issue? Because there still is the whole question of private equity, of outsourcing. You can argue about when he left Bain Capital and whether he was still getting money from Bain Capital and what some of the companies in Bain were doing. Companies that did end up working overseas and sending jobs overseas. But isn't it a bigger problem for Republicans than for the White House?
No. When you said $500 million to Fisker and it goes to Finland immediately, when you send the solar money and it goes to Mexico, when you send the turbine money and it goes to Denmark, and we can go on all day, there's $29 billion worth of purchases that came out of this administration, outsourced jobs to foreign countries. Mitt Romney outsourced zero. Obama outsourced 29. Zero. He wasn't there when those issues came up.
Well, first of all, the $29 billion are not all outsourced from the administration, because
sure they are.
A lot of those jobs still remained here. There are jobs when you do a grant. Governor, there are jobs here as well as overseas.
You're struggling, Andrea. You're struggling.
Well, first of all, these are competing claims, and we will get back to you with all of the numbers. But the point is,
let's talk about the 3% you brought up. You want to talk numbers?
Let's talk about the Joint Committee on Taxation and Glenn Kessler in the Washington Post.
But that 3% represents the group of small businesses that create the bulk of the jobs under small businesses. They're the larger ones. So they don't create 3% of the jobs. It means 3% of the small businesses, which create the majority of the jobs. So give all the numbers. That's not what the
Joint Committee on Taxation
said, it is. Sir. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. They create most of the jobs involved.
That is not what Glenn Kessler with the Washington Post or the Joint Committee on Taxation said. They said that only 3%.
Governor Sununu, this is Lawrence O'Donnell. You saw your candidate, George H.W. Bush, come into New Hampshire, win the New Hampshire primary with 53% of the vote, a much, much higher percentage than anyone's projecting.
Who won it like that? George H.W. Bush?
George H.W. Bush.
You don't know what you're talking about. George H.W. Bush won it. I'm sorry. In 1988, he won it 38 to 29.
1992. He then went on to lose the general election. Is there something in the model?
As an incumbent.
That's right. He had the power of the incumbency. He had the power of incumbency in New Hampshire. He was a more powerful candidate in New Hampshire than Mitt Romney was tonight. He then went on to lose the general election.
You're really funny. You're really funny.
I'm just asking you, Governor.
You can't resist. You really can't resist it, can you? George Herbert Walker Bush came in 1992 as an incumbent Republican president. Of course he got over 50%. Now, I do realize that he also lost when Ross Perot came in as a third-party candidate. I see no parallel in the primary. I see no parallel in the general, and I think you're grasping at straws.
Well,
but other than that, you're okay.
You got to my question, and I thank you. I was just going to ask you, is that kind of strong finish that President Bush had in New Hampshire, and then the collapse in the general, is there something in the Romney candidacy that you see will predict for you a different outcome?
Yeah, the Romney candidacy won in Iowa. It's winning here. He's not running as an incumbent. He's running in a fully challenged primary and putting those wins together. And he's prepared to go through this whole process, pick up the delegates, and go forward. Romney also has one advantage that George Bush didn't have. Mitt Romney's running against an absolutely incompetent president that's ruined this country's economy, that hasn't done anything to save jobs, and is only going to try and run by attacking Romney instead of standing on his record. But I think Mitt Romney is the one candidate that can withstand that kind of a campaign.
Chris Matthews in Manchester.
Walk me through that.
It's good to be here.
Thank you, appreciate that. Why the birther thing? I mean, I'm going to make an assumption that you don't.
I don't know.
Agree with Donald Trump.
Why is CNN so fixated on this?
Well,
why don't we talk about the jobs issue in this country?
Sure, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But let's start with this.
And the disastrous. It's CNN that wants to bring it up. I don't want to bring it up. Mitt Romney has made it clear. Mitt Romney has made it clear that he believes that President Obama was born in the U.S. You had Donald Trump on last night, and now you are asking the question this morning.
Well,
it's CNN's fixation.
So you don't think it's a valid question to ask if someone who is posing as a supporter / surrogate at a high level, Donald Trump isn't your random supporter, he's a high-level big funder, has talked about how much money in the millions of dollars that he's thinking about donating to the campaign. You don't think that that's a big deal, that that person consistently talks about the fact that he believes the President of the United States is not a citizen of the country?
I think it's as equivalent an issue as Bill Maher, who gave $1 million to President Obama, talking with such a foul mouth about women. But you can't pick your supporters in this country. The fact is that this country has a jobs problem, and supporters of the president, like CNN, keep wanting to talk about other issues.
You know what's interesting? Every time you ask anybody a hard question, they suddenly go to this, well, you must be supporting.
This isn't a hard question. This is an easy question. Mitt Romney has made it clear he believes the President of the United States was born in the United States. Now we can talk about the big issues in this country.
So let me ask a follow-up
24 million people
I'm happy to get to jobs in a second.
24 million people underemployed.
Which I agree with you on that front. And we're going to get to that in 1 second. But before we get to that, I want to ask you, why does Mitt Romney not go further? For example, as I'm sure you have seen many times, when John McCain was posed a question by a woman who asked him a question, not only did he say, here's my position, he said to her, let me correct you. So I'm going to play that clip for you first, and then we'll talk about it.
Aren't you embarrassed to be speaking directly from the Obama speaking points that they distributed yesterday? Aren't you embarrassed to sound exactly like the Obama spokesman talking about John McCain? This is ridiculous.
This is a clip that we have played before.
You should be embarrassed.
It has run many times. It's a conversation that's been had.
Come on. Come on. Let's talk jobs. Let's talk jobs.
Is that because you don't want to talk about the fact that a major fundraiser is a birthright?
That's not an issue. It's not an issue.
You don't think anyone,
There is nobody in the Romney campaign that believes that the president was not born in the United States.
So then how come someone doesn't say, Donald Trump is wrong? And we're going to tell Donald Trump
is wrong. The president was born in the United States.
That, I think, might be the first time. Well, thank you.
No, it isn't, ma'am. No, it isn't. It's just because you don't read enough that you don't understand that. Let's go to the issue.
There is no need to get into personal attacks. There is no need for it. We can move on.
I'm not getting into personal attacks. I'm talking about the fact that you have a fixation
of asking questions when someone who is clearly a birther is a representative.
You did it last night with
I was sleeping last night.
And you opened the show today.
That's what I was doing last
Trump.
night. That's what I was doing last night. So I did not do anything but sleeping last night because I go to bed early.
a spokesman, a surrogate for Governor Romney. Speak now. John Sununu, of course, is the former governor of this state, New Hampshire. He supports Governor Romney for president. He was also White House chief of staff, of course, for the first President Bush. Governor Sununu, let me ask you a particular point here. Should candidates be responsible for ads put on the air by their former staffers and friends in their interest? Should they be responsible for the content of those ads?
Then, look, you guys are reveling and wallowing in ridiculous perception of what's going on. There's a law out there that defines what can and can't be done by those PACs, and all the candidates are following the law. And to suggest that Governor Romney shouldn't know what's in that ad with all the clippings that have been out describing it, come on, stop being ridiculous and get to the point. You guys don't even understand New Hampshire politics. When you think there's something bad about tithing your time to serve, if there's any state that understands that Mitt Romney going in and serving and giving his time and going back to the private sector is a normal part of the process, it's New Hampshire. Stop being ridiculous and talk about the issues, the job problems in this country, the need to cut spending, and the need to cut taxes. And when the
governor used the word ridiculous,
you guys avoid
just repeating the word. Governor, repeating the word ridiculous doesn't make it so. I was in Iowa and couldn't get away from the ads run by your candidate again and again and again.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Saturating that with negativity and then saying he isn't responsible. I'm asking you, is a candidate responsible for the content?
Do you know what the law is?
I know what the law is. We're talking about how laws can be used. The question is, should a candidate be responsible? Should the candidate be responsible for the ads? You say no.
You guys have an agenda that you want to drive, and you have no idea what the rules and regulations
are. You're the surrogate, sir. You obviously are here with an agenda. Okay, let me ask you.
Come on.
Let me ask you one last time. Do you think the law is a good law that allows candidates to destroy their opponents without a signature?
Everybody, every candidate agrees the law should be changed. Nobody likes that law, but unfortunately bad legislation put the Supreme Court in a position where they had to make that decision.